Thank you very much, Ray. I'd like to really build today on what Warren was talking about and many of the exposures that affect you in terms of not data loss, because that's what I'm talking about, the actual loss of your data, as opposed to many of the exposures with, to banks, financial institutions, and other companies where your data is being used by unscrupulous individuals for financial gain or social gain or political gain. So the ability to insure data against loss is a very new development, as Ray mentioned. And the insurance industry has struggled greatly with information technology for two reasons. One is the insurance industry really has tried hard but failed in some ways to understand the risks. And you can imagine from Warren's presentation and your knowledge that to be able to insure something, you need to understand it, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. And the other one is that there's a lot of confusion in the courts, too, with regards to, is it a hard asset, is it a soft asset, exactly what is it, and how do you insure it? With the result that I know for a fact that your business insurance policy, even though it might cover a lot of exposures, your buildings, your equipment, your computers, and you might have a $100 or $200 million limit, the loss of data will be sublimited to $50,000 or $100,000. And that's because of some of the things I'll be talking about. But like data insurance is a lot like life insurance. You don't want to collect on it because when it's gone, it's gone. The good news is that the value of data insurance is in the standards, the systems, and the procedures that you need to have in place for the insurance companies to actually insure your data. In my previous life, which was in the area of equipment insurance, the engineering managers and the operations managers loved us coming to their facilities, making loss prevention recommendations, saying you need to do this, this, and this to make sure that your equipment is going to stay viable, not break down. And they would take these loss prevention recommendations to the chief financial officer of the company and say, see, this is what we have to do, please give me the money. And this is really a lot of what I've been hearing about from you today and yesterday and in my, just with other companies around the world, that the value of data insurance is in the loss prevention, and then if something really does go wrong, there's obviously a claim payment to be made. So I'm going to talk today about risk management, data, how to value your data, some of the methodologies around this. And I'd like to start, however, with a story about what happened when our company decided to get into property insurance. We decided to diversify away from equipment insurance into property insurance. And so when you do that, you don't want to pay any claims. So the first thing you do, and what we did, is one of our very first risks is we insured a metal building with metal machines bending metal rods, or actually rebar, which is used to strengthen concrete. And we thought that was a pretty safe risk, so what happened was the owner of the company was actually here in Florida for a 2-week vacation. He flew back to Toronto on a Saturday night, went into the office on Sunday morning, and did some work, walked through the plant, thought he smelled smoke, walked all through the plant, couldn't find out what he was doing. So on the way home, like every good Canadian, he stopped at Tim Hortons for a coffee and a donut. And while he was having his coffee, he thought, you know, something's not right. So he turned around and he went back to the plant. He walked through the plant again. Still couldn't find anything. But as a really responsible owner, he phoned the fire department. And he said, you know, I think I smell smoke. And the fire department said, listen, buddy, yeah, we don't come because you think you smell smoke. So he was so responsible, he said, well, there's a fire. So, you know, out come three fire trucks. They go all through the building, they go through the office, they go through the plant, they go through the warehouse. And they finally find a bathroom fan that is stuck. It smells, you know, it's red hot, it smells like, you know, that electrical smell. And he says, I think we found your problem, and they go home. He's not too sure, but he goes home as well. Well, the police phoned him 2 hours later because the whole building was burned down to the ground. So, what is the story here? The story is that things happen. And they don't always happen the way you think they're going to happen. And it usually means it takes 1 or 2 or 3 things to go wrong for losses to occur. And I'm not talking about your automobile, you know, accident where you hit, you know, hit some water and you hit a tree. I mean, I'm talking about the bigger losses. And data losses and security losses are typically bigger losses. And as Warren mentioned, you know, you need to be proactive in building scenarios. This is something that I saw the other day. Symantec did a survey just this year of 4,500 companies, and they determined from the recipients that information represented 49% of the value of the organization. Now, data is not all information. I mean, you know, there's a lot of information in people's heads and stuff like that. But if you think that data might represent 30% of the value of information, then that means that data, electronic data, represents 15% of the value of a corporation. And that's a lot of money. Not only that, 69% of companies they found lose data. Now, I'm sure that that statistic is a lot less with your organizations because enterprises always have lower rates. But even if it's low, it's still a big problem. And that accounts only for the revenue side of things. It doesn't account for brand devaluation, which is a huge, huge thing. So, in the insurance industry, we talk about 1 in 100-year events. New Orleans was a 1 in 100-year event. It just happened that it happens today. A lot of data was lost in New Orleans. Christchurch, a lot of data was lost in that earthquake. In fact, the municipality of Christchurch, and actually the government of New Zealand, had to have a crane hold up the roof of a data center that was destroyed in the earthquake so that employees could go in. I'm not sure it was safe, but they had to go in and take out the servers that had the data on it because the data wasn't located anywhere else. Fukushima, a lot of data. It was a terrible accident, as we all know. And again, a lot of data was kept locally and lost. Just thinking about that, you know, there's also the radiation exposure. And this is just a little sidebar, but what happened with that radiation exposure in those nuclear plants from a risk management point of view, I can tell you, never had to happen. The problem was the fact that the generators, you know, the backup diesel generators, they were simply located in the wrong place. They were placed somewhere where when the water came in, the generators were underground. If they had been built up on high standards, you know, so that, you know, even with the intake air, you know, pipes even higher, because a generator can actually operate underwater, you know, it just wouldn't have happened. So you're probably thinking right now, well, this isn't going to happen to me, and I think you're probably right. But there's other things that can happen. And you know, it doesn't take a fire to destroy data in a data center. We actually lost data in our data center. Well, we have a COLA. We don't have our own data center, but in our cage, as you say, because a technician was working on the fire suppression system, and he made a mistake, and the fire suppression system let go and flooded the whole room with gas. And you know when, and I didn't know this, but when it lets go, there's a sonic boom. And the sonic boom destroyed our servers. So think about that, you know. When it lets go, either it destroys your servers because of the fire suppression system, or if it doesn't go off, the fire destroys it. Then there's this guy. This guy is the hacker, the virus creator, the employee that's creating sabotage, the vendor who's creating sabotage. I think Warren actually had a bigger list. I mean, you know, his list was so long, I don't think I could get it up there, all the things that could happen. But, you know, again, that's not the message here. That is not the problem, because I know basically that everyone is prepared for any one of the things that I've just mentioned. But are you prepared for the employee who's going to create some sabotage at the same time that the data center has a fire, just when you're doing some systems work? And our experience is that most companies are not prepared. Data center, and I'm talking here again about data loss, the actual loss of the data. A lot of data centers, you know, are secure, and although I'll talk about some serious exceptions to that, but the practice of data loss risk management is something that we find can generally be improved. There's a lot of statistics out there, and Warren gave you some other statistics. But, you know, I think the more important one, outside of these ones, is the fact that 10 years ago, the world created 2 terabytes of data. Today, we're creating 4 terabytes per day. And in 10 years' time, we're going to be creating 8 terabytes per hour. Now, more data, more value, more protection challenges. I'm not saying that all that data is going to be valuable data. Probably 80% of it is going to be Facebook and whatever else is out there that our kids are using. But the fact of the matter is that we are working to a new electronic data stage in our lives, for our companies. In that loss that I was talking to you about, you know, about $1 million of that loss was actually accounts receivable. The company lost all their paper records, and when they went to collect on, you know, from suppliers and customers and stuff like that, you know, the customer said, no, I paid you. Well, you know, they didn't have proof, and so we ended up covering them for what was easier to cover then, valuable paper insurance. And on the way down on the plane, I was reading the Toronto Globe and Mail, and they were talking about how Iran had cyber attacked the Bank of America, JP Morgan, and Citibank. And as, again, you know, referring to Warren, you know, what happens is the more secure you are, the greater the desire of hackers to come in and either phish your data or make you lose your data. So security is going to be one of the biggest challenges of the future. Story in the news. A reputable storage provider has lost data over 7,500 customers who relied on the company to keep their data safe. This was due to the installation of defective hardware. So what happened here was that the company, and you know, it's pretty standard in the industry, used all the same kind of RAID servers, disks, etc., to store the data, but then the manufacturer had defective hardware, and they all started crashing at the same time, and so the duplication wasn't sufficient, and 7,500 customers lost their data forever. When you're looking at data centers, because that's where a lot of the outsourced data centers are, even though it might be outsourced, it could be yours. There are a lot of little things that are to me, quite interesting. You need to go through the front door. You know, you're double checked. You have photo ID. You know, the photo ID. You know, the picture disappears after half an hour, so you can't get back in. And then when I do a survey, I find the back door open for smokers. You know, the fuel caps on the diesel generators are not locked, so open again to sabotage. And the thing that perhaps surprises me most is that I've never seen a data center test for explosives. I've actually walked into a data center with a locked box full of disks off computers from employees that were no longer with the company. I went in with our IT manager, because we have to keep all these records for 7 years under law. And I asked the person, you know, that took us in through I said, how do you know what's in my box? And she said, oh, we don't want to know. I said, well, you know, how do you know it's not explosives? And she looked at me and says, oh no, you know, we know all of our customers. So why do MSPs and data centers never make promises that your data is actually safe? Well, first of all, they know that something can go wrong, just like everybody else. If they do provide some sort of guarantee, it's basically too risky on their balance sheet, so they can't take the risks. So the only thing that they can do is purchase insurance, and the insurance people, the insurance industry, won't provide that either. What we're missing out there today is essentially standards, procedures, and systems that can be applied in a global sense across across your industry and other industries, so you know that your data is valuable. Amy DiCarlo from a consulting company, Current Analysis, basically said we really need a document that says what is good enough cloud security. And Data Insurance, the company I now work for, we've spent 5 years actually working on those standards, and we're now working with the Storage Network Industry Association on trying to figure out how we can share some of this information with you and other clients around the world. Insurance companies, why do they not provide it? I said, the insurance industry likes to provide new products, but on the information technology side, they have come up with cyber liability insurance and network security insurance. Most of these products are very highly manpower intensive. There's an incredible amount of work that goes into determining what you as a company are doing for loss prevention. They don't understand what the value of the data is, i.e. what the potential claim could be. It's very hard to determine how all the data is protected. And at the end of the day, really what an insurer wants to do is talk about, or internally, about what rate to charge, what premium to charge you. And so, as I said, they basically come up with the solution that it's really too dangerous to offer a high indemnity. So what they do is they say, we'll give you $50,000 or $100,000 worth of coverage. There's many exposures out there. Like I said, Warren would have had 15, 20, 30 more boxes up there. All these lead or can lead to data loss. And again, the message here today is not that one or two of these things will happen. It's the fact that usually there's 1, 2, 3 things that take place when you have the big loss. I just want to go back to my story. So you're probably wondering what happened in that fire, what caused the fire. What happened was on Saturday, when the plant was shut down, they were welding on an overhead crane in the plant. And they had what's called a spark watch, someone with essentially a fire hose to make sure that as they're welding on the overhead crane, that there's nothing that's going to cause a fire. What happened was, because it was up high, the sparks ended up flying behind kind of a small wooden building inside the plant that the operators used. And some of these sparks ended up in insulation behind, really between that wooden building and the office buildings, which was adjacent right next to the plant and was also built out of wood. And so it was shortly after the owner left that the insulation stopped smoldering, actually created the flames, burned down the building, burned down the office building, and then ended up burning down the whole plant. So that's where the data insurance policy that we created comes in. Like I said, the benefit of it is in the standards and systems and procedures that I'll talk about. Insurance usually gets a little bit of a bad rap because of the fine print, but I can tell you that most of these items on the board here are all covered. In other words, we cover viruses, we cover hacking, we actually cover accidental deletion of data by employees if the procedures are actually followed. The only things that are excluded in the policy are things such as war, nuclear risks, and terrorism, although to tell you the truth, even some of those I can't see actually affecting our system and the insurance, but the insurance industry excludes them in every single policy that they issue. The other exclusions would be things such as the loss of your encryption key. If you're encrypting your data, and all the data that we insure is encrypted, but there are situations, for example, in healthcare, where we're not allowed to have the encryption key. So if we don't have the encryption key, obviously, if the client loses the encryption key, then we can't return the data. I want to turn now to how you value data. Now, there's many ways to do this. It's really a new science. The data owner assigns the value to the data. In a typical insurance policy, you insure something for X million dollars, and after the claim occurs, then we go in, the insurance industry will go in and say, now prove to me that you lost business, prove to me that you had to recreate the data or rebuild the building and all that kind of stuff. We actually have a fairly simple model, which is called the fixed indemnity model, which says you just tell us how much your data is worth. And you have to understand that it's not, you don't have to insure all your data, or if you even want to segregate your data into 5 different pots. I mean, your customer data, your sales data, your operational data, your financial data, you can actually insure each one of these things separately. So, there's the obvious ones there, the cost of recreating data and the like. There's also those that affect revenue and expenses that are either hard or soft. So you can actually build in things like liability lawsuits or brand recognition if you think that you have to assign a value to brand recognition, but brand recognition, if you feel that you're going to lose customers because your brand goes down, then you can build that into the value of your data. So why would you actually purchase data insurance? Well, the first and obvious thing, I think, is that buildings have smoke alarms, buildings have security, equipment has regular maintenance, key people see doctors for health checkups, product liability concerns are mitigated through better design standards, and all of these are insured. So really, if your data is backed up, just like your building has security and smoke alarms, should it not be insured as well? The other one, as we know, is that data is becoming much more valuable. And you have the increased expenses, where you have fines for late tax returns. It's really part of your business continuity and disaster recovery plans. We talked a little bit about the U.S. Patriot Act and other acts. There's also an incredible amount, as you know, of legislation in countries or in different sectors, business sectors, that means that you have to do this or that. And so our customers are seeing this as being able to tell their board of directors that they have now purchased insurance on their data just as they have on their building or their equipment, which gives the board of directors comfort because they know that an insurance company is not going to insure data if the standards aren't in good shape. Similarly, if you're outsourcing things, it ensures that your outsourcing data supplier is compliant. One of the interesting things that, I don't think this affects your industry, but one of the things that we mandate with our suppliers is that if you store data in 2008 and you accidentally delete it in 2010, we have to be able to retrieve it in 2012. And a lot of companies, and I'm talking here more about files and databases, but a lot of companies that supply data storage actually have this roll-off technique where things roll off, and so it's not retrievable. I think this is the best reason, though, as I've said. Insurance companies are only willing to insure your data if you're compliant. That means that both the tool that you use, your firewalls, your hacking prevention, your data backup, and also the continual monitoring of these standards. And that's where companies like Above Security come in, that continual monitoring of what you're doing. It's not like ISO 9000 or to some degree 27002. These are stamps of approval. What you need with data security is the ability to look at it 24/7. There's two ways that we do the data side. This is the insurance start. These are more for SME type customers, whereby the client values the data, then insures the insurance company will provide the policy, and then we have the client upload or transfer the data on a regular basis to approved data centers or data backup suppliers that we have worked with in advance. So we know that they are compliant and then satisfy the underwriters. The alternative for the larger companies is that we, after getting you to value your data and figure out what you want to do, then we come in and look at your systems and your procedures and then usually make recommendations to comply with the underwriters, and then the insurance company will issue the policy. So the message here today is about thinking about the impossible happening. Most people don't think that way. They, even when we look, in the actuarial world on financial accounting, I was always surprised that they would look at the risk to our insurance company and say, well, the risk here on, say, increasing interest rates to your company is X, or the risk to your equity portfolio is Y. And so they would say, well, this is the biggest risk. And I'd say, do you not think that both of these things can happen at the same time? And they say, well, that's not what we do or what's legislated. But from a risk management and insurance perspective, you have to really take a look and say what can happen, and then work with the financial department, your CFO, to purchase the insurance or the systems when it's available. I just wanted to say a few words about data insurance licensing as well, so you understand where we're coming from, because this is, speakers don't usually plug their own company, but this isn't a plug. This is just to give you a perspective on where we're coming from, because this took about 5 to 6 years of development to come up with the risk management standards for data. So we are not an insurance company, we're not a data storage company, we're not a protection company. These are all outsourced. What we do is we put together the complete system. So we are a licensor with using basically the intellectual property and the patents and copyright that we've developed over the last 5 years. We're backed by Lloyd's of London. We've been operational in New Zealand. That was our test bed for the last 2 years. That's where the company was founded. And now we're very close to finishing our final round of equity and loan financing so that we can expand internationally, usually to, well, we're already going into Australia, and we're bringing the product to North America and the UK later this year or 2013. So thank you very much for the opportunity. I hope that it's given you some different or additional insight to help you with your cause of getting the monies from the financial side of things to provide the right data security and prevention and loss prevention standards to protect your data. So thank you very much.